What's going on, everybody? It is Wednesday, and you all know Wednesday is one of my favorite days for Q&A day. Now remember, if you have a question for an upcoming episode, don't hesitate to ask it in the comments below. Now, a couple things I'll throw out there. We got a lot of cool stuff coming on this week. I did a one card PSA submission that is back. And then I did about a 12 card or so SGC submission, which is also back. They actually arrived on the same day. So I'll be going through what I submitted, how the grades went, how it may be affecting future submissions, things like that, where I stand on each. So that'll be a fun video. At least I think it'll be fun. You could see what I submitted, why I submitted it. I'll show you the card and then I'll reveal the grade and see if you can guess. I will say this, some of the grades came in higher than I expected and some came in lower than I expected. So what I'm starting to realize is maybe I'm not that good at evaluating the technical grades, which is fine. That's not a big deal. Now, before we get into the questions, I wanted to show you a couple quick things. Now, remember, my friend Isaac over at the Penny Sleever is giving the first 250 people a Captain Midlife card. That card is super cool. I love it. And if you're interested in one, there are still about 50 available. I've sent about 200 of them out so far. And again, we're doing 250. You'll also get a Mr. Penny Sleever from Isaac. And on the back of that is the promo code MidLife. If you want to purchase any supplies from the Penny Sleever, you'll be able to get a discount with that promo code. Now, the Mr. Penny Sleever card will come in a top loader from Penny Sleever, and the Captain Midlife card will come in a semi-rigid from the Penny Sleever. So that is still available. Down in the comments below, or in the description below, I have a link to that. When you get yours, if you have Instagram, don't hesitate to upload it and tag me. I'm going to show some of those pictures coming up and as part of some videos. So consider doing that if you're interested. And then I also got a couple of gifts. My friend Dan of Dan's Vintage PC, he sent me a couple of Matt Manning cards for my 2-year anniversary. This one is out of $2.99. I have this one in orange, which I think is out of 25 or 50. I can't remember. And then he also sent me this super cool top certified Manning autograph. You can see he changed his autograph. If you've seen some of my other ones, he changed his autograph about 2 years ago. So his earlier autographs are different, which is actually, I think, kind of cool. And then I also got a gift in the mail, but it didn't have a name on it. So I don't know who to thank, but I still want to show what I got. So some kind person from Virginia, that's where it was, the envelope was postmarked from, sent me some really nice stuff. He sent me this cool Archives Manning Gold out of 10, 2 out of 10. He sent me a Jerry Rice card, Joe Montana, knowing I'm a 49er fan. Those were super cool. Some other Matt Manning cards. These are going to go awesome in my Matt Manning collection. He sent me this one. I don't think I had that one. I definitely didn't have this one. And then he sent me a couple other cool cards. Look at that Ruth card, 35th anniversary. This Cobb. This. So thank you. Again, there wasn't a note and there wasn't a name on the return address, so I don't know who sent them, but thank you for sending them. That was super nice of you. So that was a fun week of mail I got from some of you all. Now, again, we've got Q&A. If you have a question, ask it in the comments below for an upcoming episode. And let's go to my first one here. Hi, Greg. With the 2024 year winding down, what are some of your hobby goals for 2025? Any specific types of cards you didn't buy much of this year that you would like to see yourself buying more next year? Do you see yourself implementing new or different strategies too when it comes to buying and selling cards? Are you already saving up for many big money purchases like Strongsville and the National? Also, again, congrats on 2 years. One of the best YouTube channels. I hope you don't ever feel pressure like you have to buy cards for video content. It's something I wonder if other content creators struggle with as well. All right, this is a really good series of questions, and I wrote them down because I would definitely forget some of the components to this question if I didn't, so I'm going to kind of go through them. I will say that last year, my friend Darren of Return to Collecting and I did a kind of preview video of 2024. And we're planning on, again, doing a preview video for 2025, some of the gold cards that we're after, what we're looking for, why we're looking for those cards. We'll probably also do like a year in review video. So those will be coming. So I'm going to kind of expand on some of this in more detail when we do that video. I think last year we did it on New Year's Eve. We did our preview video. So I thought that was kind of fun. So we might do that again on New Year's Eve. So keep an eye out for that. But let me kind of go through these. So one, the last part is, have I ever felt pressured to buy cards for video content? I think that's a good question because I do think that a lot of people who make YouTube videos, a lot of their videos talk about their pickups and showing the cards that they've purchased. And my videos aren't really about that. I do one a month where I show a pickup. Sometimes I'll do a bonus one if I pick up kind of a bigger card or something. But generally, that's not the case. So I don't really feel much pressure to pick up cards. Now, I will say this. The last 6 months, I've been on a little bit of a spending spree. You know, Strongsville, I bought some big stuff. The National, I bought some big stuff. I bought a couple of big cards last month, a couple of big cards this month. And I need to start kind of piling money for Strongsville. So I think that there's a good possibility that over the next 6 months or so, I will have fewer pickups, or the pickups that I'm getting won't be quite as expensive because I do want to go into those shows with some money. As far as do I feel pressure to pick stuff up, the only time I've ever felt a little bit of pressure is going to a card show. I'll do a card show video, and I like to show kind of my pickups from the card show. But what I've found myself recently when I go to card shows is a lot of what I'm doing is just kind of like hanging out, looking at the cards, talking to the dealers, talking to other people that I know from the hobby or people that have come up and said hello. And so I'm doing less buying. And part of the reason I think I'm doing less buying is because some of the stuff that I'm looking to buy is not something that you see at a lot of local card shows. So there have been times I'm like, man, I feel like I should buy something at this card show because I'm going to do a card show video and then I won't have any pickups. But I find that I haven't been, I feel that way, but it doesn't get me to buy something. So I have a couple of times felt a little bit like I should buy something so that the video has a pickup, but it hasn't resulted in me actually buying something. As far as, new goals for the year, my big YouTube goal last year was to have more collaborating. A couple of people said, you're kind of a lone wolf. You don't really collaborate much. And my goal for this year was to collaborate more. Because if you go back a year, I only had a couple of videos where I had guests, or I went on some channels, but I didn't have a lot of people on mine. And so that was a big change this year, and that's something I've really enjoyed. And if anything, I want to do more of that. As far as my card collecting, The problem is the more exposure I have to cards and the more shows I go to and the more friends that I make through the hobby and the more videos that I watch, I get exposed to more and more things that I like. And when there's more things that you like, there's more things you want to buy and add to your collection. So I fight really, really hard to be fairly focused, but I don't always win that battle. And there are times I grab things along the way that probably prevent me from getting to some of my bigger card goals. So if anything, I would say try to be more focused than I've been. As far as the sets that I collect, I very much enjoy collecting Hall of Famers from the T206 set. I'm still, my goal is to get at least one card from each Hall of Famer in the T206 set. That's a goal right now. I have several. I am far from all of them. Another goal that or another set that I'm working on, or little subsection to my collection, is I enjoy collecting Yankee captain cards. Now I don't have a Gehrig and I don't have a Ruth. Both of them were captains, but I have a card of every other captain. But at first it was, I just want to buy one card of each Yankee captain. And now I find for vintage guys, I'm kind of enjoying collecting multiple cards of the Yankee vintage captains. So I don't need 35 Aaron Judges or 110 Derek Jeters. Now, don't get me wrong. I like having some of each of their cards, but I don't need 10 Willie Randolphs. I don't need 10 Ron Guidrys. 2-3 is plenty, I think, is fine. So, but when it comes to those guys kind of like Munson and before, those are guys that I think, and I have a lot of Nettles cards, as you guys know, but I'm going to continue to focus a lot on that. There are a couple other sets that I've found myself kind of gravitating towards, and that, I have shown recently a couple of cards from the M1015 set. I just love the look of it. And so the 33 Gaudy, there are a few cards from that set that I still really want. There's some more Jackie Robinson cards that I really want. So I feel like the list is so big, adding anything to the list is difficult. The harder part is probably narrowing the list. And that's why over the next month or so, I'm going to really be working on narrowing the list so I could try to set, a dozen or so goal cards for 2025. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. As far as selling, I don't sell a ton. I don't anticipate that changing. In order to sell, you have to have things you don't want. And most of the things that I've kind of changed from, I've sold. Now, my interests do continue to change a little. And so as a result, I'm going to continue to kind of, wean away from certain things and use those funds toward other things. There might be some cards I decide to trade up for where I have to liquidate some cards that I like having so I could get the other cards. But for the most part, I see myself doing less selling next year, just like I did more last year than I have in 2024. And I think I'll probably do even less next year in 2025. So that's kind of where I'm at. I hope that makes sense. But again, I'll get a little bit deeper into a review of 2024 and a preview of 2025 in upcoming videos, which will be a lot of fun. Question for a future show. Is sports cards and non-sports cards a hobby or an addiction, or a little bit of both? All right. When I first read this question, I was like, oh man, this might be kind of a complicated response. And then the more I thought about it and the more time went by, I'm like, I don't really know how complicated it actually is. The first thing I'll say is, for some people, this is just a hobby, right? There's not any sort of addictive behaviors. I think for some people, it is absolutely an addiction. So is it in general, is the hobby an addiction or a hobby? I think that it depends on the individual. You could absolutely find yourself starting to get into a place where it is an addiction. You know, if you're spending money that is supposed to be on bills and you're spending it on cards and then you can't pay your bills, that you've gone too far. That, my opinion. And who am I? I'm just a guy with a camera that he talks into. But that's kind of my take. If you're keeping secrets about what you're buying, and I know a lot of people are probably saying, uh-oh, I sometimes do that. That would be something I think is maybe worrisome. See, for me, the biggest concern I have about the modern hobby, modern cards, is for whatever reason, they've really gone to this breaking model, right? Where you buy a spot and your spot might get a hit and then you could win big or you could win nothing. It's very, very much like the roulette table, right? And when you play on the roulette table, there is an absolute chemical rush of I need to win my money back, I need to try again so that I'm not losing, and that could become fairly destructive, right? And when a lot of the product that is currently being produced is very expensive, and the values or assigned values of some of the bigger hits is extreme, like it seems to be in a lot of cases, that to me is a little bit of a warning sign of that is kind of creating a little bit of an addiction. And that's helping at the moment some of the card manufacturers. But I worry what the long-term effects are, especially when we're getting our young people involved in that. Now, part of me says, well, who am I to say what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, if this is addictive, if it's not addictive? I mean, it's just my opinion. But, I mean, you're asking me the question, and I do have concerns about the modern part of the hobby. The pack pulling before, you know, when I was a kid, you'd pull a pack, and the difference between the best card and the worst card was not a ton. It was not like life-changing money. And now it potentially is. And, you know, if you're getting carried away, and it's the same thing for someone going to a slot machine or somebody going and buying scratch-offs at the gas station or whatever it is, it could become destructive. So I really think if you're just kind of, this is a part of your life, it's not everything. You know, you're not spending money that you can't afford to be spending. You're not having negative impacts on relationships. You're not having secrets that are being kept, which could become issues with the relationships. Then I think that most people, and I know that's a generalization, and I don't know what's going on in everyone's house and behind their closed doors, but I think a lot of us, this is just a hobby. It's something we do as an escape and a nostalgic opportunity to kind of just enjoy our free time. And that's healthy. That's really healthy. But if you're starting to get carried away and you're starting to spend money you really can't afford to be spending, then you're starting to maybe go down the slippery slope of an addiction. And there's no doubt in my mind that there are quite a few people that are participants in the hobby that it is an addiction. And I think that there are a lot of people who it's simply a hobby and there is no component of addiction. And so I feel a little bit weird because, again, I have no expertise in this. I'm just simply spitballing. But if we were hanging out, you know, on the couch and watching a football game and you said, do you think it's addictive or do you think it's just a hobby? I think that would probably be my response. And, but, you know, that's just my take for whatever it's worth. I really enjoy your videos, Greg. Question for next week. I know you've mentioned many times before that you think vintage football cards are undervalued, and I completely agree. Do you also feel that way about vintage basketball cards? I have found especially the 69 to 70 tops basketball cards are criminally undervalued. There are so many Hall of Fame players in that set, and other than the Lou Alcindor and a couple of others, you can pick them up for less than $100 in a PSA 6 and 7. The 1961 Fleer set is also cheap as long as they're not the big stars like Wilt Chamberlain or Oscar Robertson. What are your thoughts on vintage basketball? All right. Vintage cards, besides just baseball cards, I also like and collect. I have some non-sport stuff, as you know. I have football cards. I have basketball cards. I have some soccer cards. I've got a little bit of a lot of stuff. And so I absolutely love thinking about and talking about basketball cards as well. And I haven't shown some of my basketball cards in a while. I've sold some of mine because the draw that I've had recently to pre-war stuff has been a little bit greater than my desire to have some of my basketball cards. I still have a decent amount, but I don't have as much as I did maybe 2-3 years ago. Now, vintage basketball there are a few issues that it has going on for it that aren't good, that prevent it, I think, from being as valuable and attractive. And the biggest thing I believe is people like consistency. You guys know that if it's Wednesday, I'm probably going to have a Q&A day video. So you kind of know that. And so if you're sitting there going, oh, what am I going to do later? Or what am I going to listen to while I'm working today? You go, oh, it's Wednesday. Greg would have a video. Same thing with Mondays. So that consistency is something that I think people appreciate, and people kind of like patterns, and people like a consistent idea. I mean, it's like that's the same reason Monday Night Football's on Monday night. It's not sometimes it's Monday and sometimes it's Tuesday and sometimes it's Wednesday. It's on Monday night, and you go, oh, it's Monday night. Monday Night Football's on. We kind of build that into how we do things. Now, also, a lot of us are player collectors. And because we're player collectors, we go, oh, if you're a Yastrzemski fan, you go, oh, I need the 60, the 61, the 62, the 63, the 64, the 65. And you have one every single year. And you collect that run. Well, one of the biggest problems with vintage basketball is there are these large blocks where there are no wide releases, right? I mean, if you go from the 61 Fleer set to the 69 top set, there's this big block of prime vintage where there are no cards. And there would have been some great cards of Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor. I mean, some really, really good Oscar Robertson. Those are some of the best vintage players. And if you look at like Elgin Baylor, he's got his rookie card in 61. And he's got 69. He's got 70. I mean, most of his career, he doesn't have any cards. Wilt Chamberlain has like 4 or 5 years at the end after his rookie card. And so what that does is it makes it where, oh, I'm a Oscar Robertson card collector. He's only got like 5 wide release cards. So how are you going to get way into vintage basketball cards when Oscar Robertson has like 5 cards? And Wilt Chamberlain has like 6 cards, and Elgin Baylor has like 3 cards. It makes it hard. It makes it hard when there's the gap. And then there's also some gaps, in the 50s. And there were some other releases, that that were regional or, food related. There were some icy cards that were kind of cool that came out, and there were the Burke Ross cards that came out. But there's these big gaps, even in more modern. I mean, after 81 tops, there's nothing in 82, 83, 84, 85. And some people are going, whoa, 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 whoa. There were star cards. There are star cards, but until fairly recently, not a lot of people accepted those as the cards. A lot of people would say the 86 Fleer was the rookie of all. And that's a whole different debate. So you got this big gap in the 60s. You got some gaps in the 50s. You've got some gaps. You got a gap between 81 and 86. And so it just makes it hard when there's no consistency or continuity to it. You want to put together a player run of a lot of these guys, and they only have a handful of cards. I mean, how many Bill Russell cards are there? Not very many. Like, at all. So, Bob Cousy, like 5 cards of a lot of these all-time great vintage guys. So I think that the reason that vintage basketball hasn't done that well is it's hard to sink your teeth into it because there's just so little of it. Obviously, there have been rule changes. Obviously, the style of the game has changed so much that it's borderline a different game. I mean, now teams will shoot 60 threes a game, and back then they didn't have a 3-point arc. So I like vintage basketball, and I have some vintage basketball, and I have some early Lou Alcindors, and I've got some Chamberlains, and I've shown them at some times before, and I like those cards. I like them a lot, but I think that's the reason that it hasn't really grown. Do I think it's undervalued and underappreciated? I do think it's underappreciated. Will it at some point jump in value? Potentially. Again, if baseball cards keep going up and they get to the point where people want to collect vintage, but certain things are unaffordable, then people look at other options. But I mean, I wouldn't put all my money from my retirement account into vintage basketball cards. But if you like them, you should collect them. I mean, that's what it always boils down to, is the value really needs to be secondary. And the primary thing is, what do you like? I like vintage basketball cards, so I have a fair amount. I've got a lot of Dr. J cards, a lot of them. And so if you like them, you should buy them. Do I think they're undervalued? I do think they're underappreciated. I do. But are they undervalued? I don't know. And will that ever change? I don't know. But it does seem like at some point they would catch on more. And I have also said, last thing I'll say, the other thing I've said is, a lot of modern collectors are football cards. I mean, football cards are king in modern. Basketball is pretty well widely collected modern too. So if at some point modern collectors start looking to vintage at all, then there aren't a lot of those basketball cards to pick from. So if you have them and there's just a few sets of them, it seems like if there was an increase in demand of those, because they're obviously much rarer than baseball cards, so it wouldn't take a huge spike in demand for the price to go up. But more than anything, just collect the stuff that you like. And if you like it, go buy it. Go add it to your collection, because it is affordable and it is cool. What is your criteria for collecting the particular cards that you add to your collection? For instance, is it statistics, accomplishments, team, player likability, image on the card, etc.? Okay, so this isn't super scientific. I'm fairly simple with what I tend to collect. I like cards that I like the looks of. To me, I'm not an art collector. You're not gonna walk through my house and on the wall see a bunch of expensive art pieces from expensive artists. My art, I like art, and my art are cards. So number 1, 2, 3, 4 on my list of what is the most important is, do I like the looks of it? Do I like the looks of the card? Now, that is not just do I like the looks of the image, but it is also, do I like the looks of the card itself, the centering, the corners? Is all of that work for me? And it's one of the reasons that I now would say that I prefer SGC slabs, because I think old cards look great in them. They're framed in. It's like if you go to an art gallery, you know, they usually have like just simple black frames, simple white matting, so that the focus is on the actual art. And having the black framing that SGC has, it draws your eye to the actual piece of art, which is the card. Now, when I am looking at the T206 set, like I talked earlier, I have been collecting that for a while. I enjoy it. A lot of those guys have 2 or 3 cards. Some have 4. And I'm usually drawn to the portrait cards. And the reason I personally, I mean, some people hate the portrait cards. Some people love the portrait cards. I like the looks of the portrait cards more because I get to see the player and what they looked like. And I just think it's cool how they're kind of in this formal uniform and they're dressed up. I like the looks of that. So in most cases, when they have an action shot and they have a portrait shot, I generally get, the one I generally want more is the portrait. Now, I don't always get the portrait, but generally I do. Now, the Walter Johnson I like better. I like the action shot a little bit more than the portrait shot, but I like both. I'd like to actually have both of those. So for me, looks is just far and away number one. And you know, we talk about value and how much does value matter. I'm kind of been thinking lately, and you'll hear more about this later in the week with some of my videos I have coming up, but I kind of am thinking about taking some of my older cards that are in PSA holders and putting them into SGC holders because I think they look so much better. And if I'm not selling them and the value is secondary and the enjoyment of how they look is the primary reason I collect, then why wouldn't I put them in a frame, which is really the primary point, the protection in the frame to grade for me at this point. Why wouldn't I put them in the frame that I think looks best for them and makes them pop the most, which is SGC? And I know a lot of people would hear that and think, and are hearing that and think I'm absolutely nuts for even considering taking cards from PSA holders and putting them into SGC holders, because the value, there is still a premium value for PSA holders, and there's, you know, that's a whole thing, and it's true. There is a premium, and in some cases it's a huge premium. In some cases it's a small premium. In some cases there's no premium. But if it's a Greg collection card, and it's not a card that think I'll be selling, and why not put it into the way that looks best? Because again, looks are by far the most important. The player matters. I don't just buy cards that are cool pictures. I also want a player who has some sort of significance or relevance, whether it be a social one, whether it be they were an important Yankee player, whether it be they served in the military, whether it be they did something for their country that I value, whether it be they were a great player, whether it be that they made the Hall of Fame and so they were an exceptional player. Like, that stuff matters too. But there are cards of players that I don't particularly like the looks of, but I like the player. and so I wouldn't buy the card, you know. So I guess that's my answer is far and away number one is what does it look like? Then second would be the person on the card and whether there was something important, significant, relevant about them. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting accomplishments, player likability. I do have a little bit of an affinity for guys who served in the military, especially a lot of those World War II guys. You know, Warren Spahn, Yogi Berra, you know the list, Bob Feller. A lot of these guys who served, Ted Williams. I don't even want to keep Moberg. I don't even want to keep going because I'll get on a whole thing with that. But the guys that served, I do have a special thing. I have so much respect for the military. I have so much respect for the guys that went through that. Stopped their careers, went through that. You know, I don't want to start getting political. I have a lot of respect for those guys. So that definitely adds to their likability. And so a guy doesn't have to be necessarily likable for me to collect their cards. But if they did something that makes them especially likable, that's something that I think is pretty cool. Somebody in a comment just the other day, I think it was in a comment, somebody reached out to me and they said, hey, did you know Roger Peckinpah, who's a former Yankee captain, was good friends with Walter Johnson and was one of his pallbearers? And I was like, really? I didn't know that. That's very cool. And that's just like another thing that's kind of cool about him. So it matters, but the look, the importance, the likability, it all matters a little bit. But I want cards that I like to look at because they're the closest thing I'll ever own to art. Greg, I would be very interested to hear your view on owning multiple copies of a card and the implications around that. Thanks. P.S. I got my cards today. Very cool. You made it to the display case. Well, at least until my 66 Batman arrives Friday. All right, so I can get long-winded, as you all know. And in this episode, there have been some answers I've kind of gone on and on and on, and people are like, why are you still talking about this? I think my answer for this particular one is actually going to be fairly short. Multiple copies of a card. I'm not a multiple copies of a card guy for the most part because there are so many cards that I want. I'm like, why would I have 4 of that card when I want all these other cards? Why not have 1 of this card, use that money on all these other cards that I want? So because of the breadth of the number of cards that I would like to have in my collection, I'd like to own, I don't want to have a lot of money tied up in the same card. Do I have multiple copies of some cards? I do. I do. It's rare though. I have multiple Greg Nettles rookie cards. I have multiple Matt Manning rookie cards. I have multiple Roger Clemens rookie cards. Some of those guys, I do have some, but in most cases, they're not expensive cards. I do understand if somebody was like, well, I want a Topps one and an O-Pee-Chee one and a Venezuela one and a signed one. And I do get that. And that I think is a little bit different because I don't think they're the same card. They're similar cards, but they're not the same card. They're a different variation of the same card. Back to the Greg Nettles rookie card, there's an error on that card. There's like a loop on the edge in the top left of the border that there's a loop variation and non-loop variation. And I have one of each. And then I have an O-Pee-Chee one. But I don't think, for me, when there's as many things as I want, that tying up a lot of money into multiple copies of something, I would rather have one copy that I like and then use the money on other things that I don't have that I also like. So that's my take on that. Now, as always, guys, thank you so much for your questions, taking the time to ask it in the comments below. Remember, if you want a Captain Midlife, we got about 50 left. I have more than 50, so if you see me at a show or something, I'll have them. But I only have envelopes and postage and Mr. Penny Sleevers in about for 250. So fill out the form in the description below if you're interested. Once I get to 250, I'll pull those because then we won't have any more to give out. Show the Mr. Penny Sleever. Again, the back on the Mr. Penny Sleever, you can see the promo code MidLife. Show them some love at thepennysleever.com and show them some love. Thanks, guys. As always, I look forward to seeing more questions this week.